Hi lovely, welcome to the live video. Today and this whole month we're discussing addiction and all the different ways it comes up in our life, but specifically today we're talking about how it really affects women's health. So if you've got any questions as we're going through, please drop them down in the comments, and if you're here with me live, that's awesome, say hi. I'd love to chat with you a little bit. If not, I'll answer your comments later on, any questions you have. And if it's a bit personal, please feel free to send anything through on a private message as well. I'd love to have a good chat with you about all of this stuff, as it's very close to my heart. So first of all, just to go very briefly over what addiction actually is. Well, it's that unconscious almost urge that you have to do something that you can't really control or stop doing, and it's something that repeats over and over again, and it really draws you in. For the purpose of this video, I'm going to keep the definition of addiction really broad. We could go into finer details of physical dependency and things like that, but yeah, let's just keep it at this behavior or this thing that you're drawn to and you just can't control it or stop it. So yeah, and it's very different to things that you need for your health. So some people get confused with this, thinking that, you know, humans are addicted to water or to, you know, all kinds of things, really, like sleeping, whatever these things that we need. But it's more these things that aren't so good for us that we know we shouldn't be doing so much. Oh, hi Irish, thanks for watching. Lovely to have you here. So moving on to different types of addiction, and we've got things like the obvious things like drugs and alcohol and smoking. And then there's the finer details like sugar and shopping, social media, just generally being on your phone, Reddit, whatever it is. So there's all different types of things, and I've probably not mentioned like the majority of them there. So just think of it as anything in general that you just don't really want to be doing, but you kind of want to stop doing. So yeah, this is kind of where my story comes in. I suppose I had real problems with smoking, and when I got that under control, it sort of morphed into a sugar addiction. So after the smoking was done, then it was like, okay, what's the next thing I'm going to jump on with? And it becomes a coping mechanism for everything that you do, and that's sort of stops you processing any emotions as well, because any time that something stressful comes up, instead of like breathing into it or expressing it creatively or getting it out of your system, you go to the coping mechanism, which is, you know, for me it was the smoking or chocolate or whatever it is that helps just kind of switch off those emotions for a moment and brings you into a bit of a dopamine response where you're feeling better. And then after a while, of course, it's not always about emotional processing. It just becomes a habit or something you like doing, especially if there's a substance in there like nicotine, obviously, that's physically addictive. The body starts to crave it. So it's all a very vicious circle. So how it affects your health? Well, physically, of course, you know, there's things in most addictive substances that aren't good for the health that we already know lots about. So in cigarettes there's tar, in sugar that just does nightmares for the body, but I'll go into a whole separate video about how sugar affects women's health specifically. So yeah, there's definitely physical things that go on. It might create some anxiety as well, so the heart's beating faster, the breath is quickening. So that's kind of the physical aspect, and I'm sure you can feel in your own body if you're struggling with addiction how this is affecting you. And then moving on to emotionally or mentally how this affects us, it constantly draws us away from the present moment. So whatever we're trying to do with our emotions or our tasks, it's constantly in the back of the mind like, oh, I'd way rather be having a cigarette or eating some chocolate or shopping or on my phone on social media. It's just constantly drawing you out and out and out, so it can be difficult to focus, it can be difficult to enjoy what you're doing in the moment, and all of these things are going to contribute to your overall mental health. And then moving on finally to how it affects your spiritual health. So oh, hi Sophie as well, thank you for joining, it's lovely to have you here. So how it affects your spiritual health, and Russell Brand talks a lot about this. I think he's hilarious and I love him. I know he's a bit wacky, but anyway, he's got some good stuff to say about drugs, obviously, because he's had a big past with that. And he talks a lot about how addiction kind of is a replacement for spiritual connection. So when we're having these addictive behaviors and we're constantly reaching outside of ourselves for something that's going to make us feel better, what we might really be craving on a deep down level is spiritual connection, or you might think of that in a different way of just listening to your heart or enjoying the moment, being present. So what I often found while I was quitting is that oh hey, I miss you too, Sophie. Oh, I'd love to catch up soon as well. Yeah, I found that as I was starting to quit smoking, I'd realised that instead of wanting a cigarette, what I actually really wanted to do was just take a few deep breaths. Or what I really needed was some water, or to go for a walk in nature, or do something that actually feeds my soul or my heart and actually makes me feel really yummy and great. So you start to notice that it's actually more about connecting to yourself, or maybe even connecting to others, family, friends, relationships, and less about the actual substance itself. So I know that might sound like a big thing to overcome, but it actually makes it so much more manageable, because if you know that just by kind of staving off these things for a few weeks or a few months, you're not going to be always craving these things, sugar, tobacco, whatever it is, cannabis. But you're actually going to be able to replace that with things that are really enjoyable, that might not seem that great at the time because of the way that all of these addictive substances affect our dopamine levels. They give us such a huge dopamine hit that going for a walk is like a really small dopamine hit, so it doesn't really feel that exciting to go for a walk when you'd rather be having some chocolate or a cigarette or whatever. But over time, what you might find is that as you stop getting these huge dopamine hits from the addictive things, the smaller dopamine hits become more and more satisfying. So as I said, things like going for a walk or even hugging a loved one or whatever, it feels so much more of a rush than it would have done before when you were getting these huge hits all the time. So moving on finally now to how this specifically affects women's health. So if you're trying to quit, or whatever phase you're in with your addiction path, you might find that the cravings come up really strongly in your inner autumn. So just before you come on your period, when you're in that PMS phase, our hormones are all over the place. There's lots of emotions flying around, and that can be the hardest time to stave off of things that make us feel better, right? And particularly we really crave yummy foods at this time, and especially sugar, and that's because of the way that the progesterone is fluctuating, and it does actually mess with our blood sugar levels and our insulin. So it makes sense that we crave sugar in this time. But it's really unhelpful to have that coming up every single month, because it can feel like, you come out of your period, out of your bleed, and you're in your spring and you're ovulating and everything's great, and you're like, oh wow, I've put it behind me, and then suddenly you're thrown back into it, and it feels like a step back. But something I was talking about with my sister-in-law effectively recently was that progress is an up and down. This always goes off screen when I do this, but it's up and down like that. So yes, you're constantly moving forward, but it's the old 2 steps forward, 1 step back, 2 steps forward, 1 step back. So yeah, every cycle that's going to come back up. And if you're working really hard on this, hopefully it comes up a little bit less each time, and then eventually it won't come up at all, which is really cool. And I guess what I really want to share from all of this is that I know how horrible it is to be drawn into addiction all the time, every day, just really struggling with it. But I also now know how amazing it is to put it behind you. and I've read for years about how to do this, and I've helped others through it. So if this is something you're struggling with, I'd love you to reach out to me, and maybe we can have a little chat and help you put this behind you too, because it really is just like freedom. Okay. So just really knowing that as well, just moving back into the women's health, that any of these addictive behaviors or substances are going to be inflammatory for your system, and they're going to really mess with your hormones as well. So anything that you've got going on like that is going to manifest as period pain and PMS. And that's because as menstruators, as women, our periods are our fifth vital sign. So if you're really struggling with bad period pain, cramping, PMS, and you know that you've got this addictive behavior as well, I can 99% guarantee that they're intrinsically linked together. And if you can get one of them under control, or the addiction under control, you'll almost definitely see a reduction in your period pain and PMS. And obviously it's important to know that it's our fifth vital sign for everything. So there might be other things contributing to it that we then need to tackle as well. But getting the addiction under control will be game changing. Okay, so that's all from me today. I'll be live at the same time next week. And I think we'll be diving into sugar and addiction and how that specifically affects women's health as well. So I'd love to see you there if you'd like to join me. But bye for now, and I'll see you next time. Thank you.